welcome back to watching this morning here on Channels Television. Now, it's been an interesting activity we've been having between Nigeria and China. Just last week, we saw the ambassador and a whole lot of representative from China in Abuja meeting with Nigeria's government. And of course, we know that the zero tariff is on from China to the whole of Africa, with 53 countries in Africa. Now, Nigeria's aquatic products have secured that zero tariff access to the market of about 1.4 billion. That's the potential consumers when it comes to aquatic market. And then the bilateral trade between both countries hit the first half of this year. We've seen an increase, $18 billion. The first half of this year, that's about how many percent increase compared to what we had last year. And of course, we've had a lot of good news and promises coming from all the interactions from the ambassador to Nigeria. He has applauded all of this and whet's the appetite of Nigerians on what else could be coming from all of this. Nigerian shipments to China spiked 80% to $2.3 billion, driven by rising monthly growth after that zero tariff took effect, trying to balance the trade. So let's look at this from the Nigerian point of view. Forgive me if you're Chinese and you're watching, but I mean, we're talking from Nigeria now. So to help us balance this trade and conversation, we have right here in the studio Mr. Ikena Emewu. He's the Director of Research for Africa at the Institute of African Studies, Zhejiang Normal University. You're welcome to the program, Mr. Emewu.
Thank you.
I know you have a lot of interaction and background with the Chinese community, and so you will help us from that aspect. From the Nigerian aspect, I want to believe. We have Dr. Bamidele Ayemibo, the Chief Executive Officer and Lead Consultant at 3T Impact Trade Academy. He joins us virtually. Dr. Ayemibo, you're not a stranger to this program, so we know you mostly be speaking for Nigeria. Welcome, and thank you for joining the program.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. So let me start with you right here. When we look at this high spike, especially in the first half, a lot of times it does seem like, there's an imbalance. And mostly you see raw materials leaving Nigeria to China, and then when it's been value has been added, the Nigerians pay even more for it, to bring it back to the country to sell, retail, and all of that. Do you see a balance of trade between Nigeria beyond this number? In reality, do you see a balance of trade and a balance in the relationship between Nigeria and China?
There will hardly be a balance of trade. And I think apart from maybe 3 countries of the world, only 3 countries of the world have fair balance of trade or positive balance of trade against China. China is always on the positive side of the balance or the scale. The issue is not China. The issue is the country that trades with China and China trades with. China owes us no duty or obligation of lifting our trade. And why do I say so? What we produce is what we trade with. China shouldn't produce for us. China doesn't produce for any country. We don't produce for China either. It is left for us to make sure that we produce what we trade with. So, balancing will be difficult until we start to produce more, to manufacture more. But what is happening right now from May 1, based on this zero tariff regime, is narrowing down the imbalance. So right now, the imbalance is narrowing down positively in favor of Nigeria. But
a lot of people are still very suspicious with all of the handshakes and the meetings and all of that. I mean, some people have the fear that China is just here to get our raw materials, and we know that the world is looking for raw materials now. And as you noted, Nigeria, among other African countries, we haven't done so well in adding value. So whether legally or illegally, there's the fear that our raw materials are actually going to China, among other destinations, at very low costs.
That is true, and that is also speculative. There's no country in the world that exports its commodities processed, all its commodities processed. The highest seller of wheat and grains to China is US. They are not processed. A lot of countries sell fruits to China. China sells to the whole world. There are things to process. There are ones you can never process. So now the processing is left for us to do, not China to do it for us. If our products don't add value and we send them as raw materials, it is our fault.
Which is why people say if China really loves Nigeria as it claims, then you should set up industries here, bring the expertise and train our people. Instead of waiting for the raw materials, then they process it there and then we buy it at more expensive prices.
They may do it, but not an obligation. The only people that have an obligation to do that is Nigeria for itself. Now, you know very well, when you count the countries of the world with a depth of human ingenuity, human capital, Nigeria is one of them. Do we need China to harness the human abilities we have before we process goods? We don't need China. We need to build the right environment.
All right, let me bring Dr. Ayemi Bo into this conversation. Dr. Ayemi Bo, so from the aspect of balancing the trade, balancing the relationship between Nigeria and China also assisting the country by building industries here and transferring expertise, where is your stance?
I mean, China has something to gain, and that's raw material. But that's not really the major issue, in my opinion, what China is looking for. China is playing the long game. China needs to diversify its shipment to the US and other parts of the world that are being protectionist right now. And if you look at that agreement, that law rather, the goal is to, by 2028, to have a bilateral agreement in which they are going to now decide what they want to bring into our economy. So this is not a long time. It's not like the US AGOA that was for over 20 years. This is just for a few years to be able to get for us to be able to have a taste of the value we can derive from China, but more importantly, is for them also to be able to negotiate going forward, so that they can deepen their transaction, their volume of trade with Africa and other parts of the world, because they really know they have a concentration risk on the US, and they need to, and also a sign to the US, also for US to also begin to see that, look, we are looking for other markets, so you can likewise agree to what we are telling you, unless we just decide to go to other markets. So for me, it looks more of a power game, and China is doing this at a time where America, EU, and other countries are trying to be protectionist. But more importantly, the fact that they are going to get a lot of our raw material. Like the guest in the studio is saying, I mean, every country exports raw material. So even though government is trying to reduce it and say we should have about 30% value, but the fact still remains that every country exports raw material. Even though we have banned share nut, people are moving that share nut through the boot path to see going out of Nigeria. People are exporting raw material. So we can't really stop raw material. What we can do is to significantly minimize and add value to it. So China is going to benefit significantly from this, from raw materials, and more importantly, also it's a long game for them to be able to increase their penetration into the African continent by signing the bilateral agreement afterward that enable them to have free access to our market.
Are we doing enough to protect ourselves as Africans, as a Nigerian, against, what might look like an exploitative relationship at the end of the day? Because even as you noted, in spite of the law, so there must be 30% value added, and a whole lot of raw material is still going, through the back door. And as Mewa said, it is our responsibility as a sovereign country to add value. I mean, you can't wait for a visitor to come and help you run your home.
I don't think we should be concerned, actually. I think we should be interested in doing what we need to do. Because what we are not doing is that we are not producing enough to be able to take advantage of that market. That's $1.4 billion market, $4 trillion. for 1.4 billion people, and with an economy of almost 20 trillion actually. China is the largest importer, largest exporter in the world, second largest importer in the world. So we have a lot to gain from this relationship. We just need, and it's important to also note this, and I need to say this, you know, if you look at the global trade, we have commodities, raw, we have the intermediary product or intermediate product, and then we have the finished goods. The demand for intermediate product is growing significantly for obvious reasons. Many countries don't want to bring in the raw because of the environment issue. They also don't want to bring in the finish because they need to create jobs in their country. So there is more. If you look at global trade, about 35 trillion, we trade in goods about 25 trillion, about half of it is actually intermediate product. So that's where, so it's like instead of doing cocoa beans, you are doing cocoa butter. Instead of doing lead oil, you are doing lead ingot. Instead of doing shea oil, you are doing shea butter. These are intermediate products, and the demand for this is growing. And I think that's where we can position ourselves, because China is a highly industrialized country. They need a lot of this intermediate product that we can ship to them to be able to convert to finished goods and ship to other parts of the world. So we must have a strategy. What do we want to do to get advantage in China? Intermediate good is an opportunity for us. So I don't think we should be worried and concerned. We should be looking at what should we do. And I don't think it's exploitative actually. I think it's just for us to be able to, and if we did, we're able to grow our intermediate product. We can sign such agreement. We just negotiate in a way that doesn't affect our local manufacturing. So we protect, because it allows you to be able to protect some important aspect of the economy, but enable us to be able to, but we can't go into the agreement 2028 if we have not significantly developed the intermediate product we want to really target and ship into the Chinese market. So in my opinion, I don't think it's exploitative. I think it's just a wake-up call for us to do what is necessary to take advantage of this 1.4 billion people market.
Yeah, another worry, Dr. Ayemibo, is there seems to be a lot of agreement being signed between China and some states, some subnationals. At the end of the day, the details of those MOUs are hardly known in the public or even by the media. And there's also fear that political interests and personal gains will not slip into this agreements between China and states.
No, most of those subnational are not trade agreement. They are agreement for construction and the like. It will still involve trade actually, because they will bring in bring in machineries, bring in tractors, bring in equipment and the like to be able to use for those construction. So I'm not sure it's going to. I think what we should be concerned about the fact that Nigeria is signing different agreements. We have SEPA signed in January. We have this now. This one is like, it's actually not an agreement as it were. It's more like a unilateral law. Just where you have a GOA, US opening its market, and just like you have DCTS, the Developing Country Trading Scheme, which a country just have a law that allow you to have access into their country, just like we have an AGOA we're having in this particular situation. So for the subnational, subnational for me is even good, because it's supposed to bring in, most of the time it's infrastructure coming in to be able to do some level of development in those countries. So what I think the state should be, and it's good you mentioned this subnational, that the state should be putting in those agreements. Look, your country buy this raw material. Can you have an agreement with us to buy this particular quantity? Look, for example, China is the largest importer of soya beans in the world. Soya beans demand is over 100 billion. Nigeria is a producer of soya beans, non-GMO soya beans. So why can't we have an agreement that says, look, out of this 100 billion, it's over 60-70 billion dollars you buy every year. Can you just buy 5 billion from us? Can we have an agreement around that? We'll give you this construction project for you to do, so you also make money from us. But open the market and show that we have an agreement that you are going to buy this quantity from us, and that can help us engage our farmer, work with BOA and NISA to produce more. That's the kind of dynamics I think we should be negotiating to be able to also take advantage. And I'm talking now in terms of the subnationals.
All right. What should Nigeria be doing now? Not just the federal government. Dr. Ayemibo just talked about what states should be doing. What can we do now in the midst or in the lifetime of this zero policy, and ahead of the MOU which we're expected to have?
Produce more. That's the only thing we need to do. Produce more, be productive.
Is it produce more or add more value?
You can't produce without adding value in the real sense of it. When you are producing more means you are adding more value. Like my colleague Dr. Ayeni said, and I said it earlier, it is not every commodity you produce that you add value to. You must process before you export or before you trade it. There are ones you must trade raw. Now, the highest beneficiaries, as an instance, from this policy right now, as Eastern and Southern African countries, essentially Eastern African countries. Do you know what they trade more? Fruits. You don't need to process all fruits into secondary scale value before you trade them. So if we want to do things right, we need to produce more. And there's a place we have advantage, competitive advantage with China in trade. Nigeria sells the largest quantity of cassava pellets to China among all the countries of the world. Nothing stops us producing more and selling the pellets like a secondary value. Nothing also stops us from processing it further before we sell to China. It's all depends on what we want to do. They all are in our hands. Now, you mentioned when discussing with Dr. Ayeni about the states doing businesses of partnerships, agreements with Chinese government. I want to let us know that by the laws of Nigeria, no state in Nigeria signs any treaty in any form with any international organization or a country without the consent of the federal government of Nigeria. So whatever is signed has the agreement and the input of the federal government of Nigeria, either to the Federal Ministry of Trade and Industries or to the Foreign Ministry. Now, when we talk about exploitation, I don't feel comfortable with that word. If we complained of exploitation 200 years ago, not in today's Nigeria, that has all the expertise in the world, no. Whatever happens to us in the negative, we should change ourselves.
So that means, as you said, we need to produce more.
We need to produce more.
Yeah.
In agriculture, produce more. In manufacturing, produce more. In processing,
in mining,
more.
The era of mining, the fear of illegal mining and the involvement of China, I'm sure you have heard it many times.
I have. It is the fault of Nigeria. No Chinese miner comes with Chinese police, Chinese immigration, Chinese judicial system, or the Chinese ministries that sign contracts on mining. Everything that happens there to facilitate anybody shortchanging us is because we created the window and the person exploits it, but not all of them come to exploit us. There's a Hainan Huaxin company that bought 83% of shareholding of Lafarge last year. That was $1 billion. They mine limestone here and gypsum to produce cement. That's mining. Now, on July 6th, the federal government of Nigeria commissioned the lithium processing plant in Nasarawa State. I think the value is $250 million. Altogether, Chinese concerns that produce and process mined mineral resources in Nigeria is in excess of $2.55 billion. Not all of them just take our raw materials and go. Some process it, but the whole thing depends on what we want them to do and what we sign with them to do.
What we allow them to do.
What we allow them to do. Thank you.
Not allowed. All right, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Ikenaimewu, Director of Research in Africa at Institute of African Studies, Zhejiang Normal University. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And joined us virtually, Dr. Bamidele Ayemibo, the Chief Executive Officer and Lead Consultant at 3T Impex Trade Academy. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you for
your
me.
views on the program.
All right.
All right, it's time to go global now.